Hello, I'm Master Sergeant Brett Kiser from Yokota Air Base, Japan, and thank you for your interest in becoming a facilitator for Project Enigma. Today I'm going to run through how the course works so that way you can best facilitate this course to the best of your abilities. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to share my screen. So this is the intro and the meaning behind Project Enigma: to build mission-ready airmen, guardians, and families through relationships. And let's go through a little bit of backstory on how this course was created. So I was lucky enough to attend a design warfare course at the Air Force Rapid Sustainment Office for a month, interviewing 1,000 airmen and guardians between multiple teams. And what we found is that airmen and guardians feel disconnected from their subordinates, from their peers and supervisors due to a lack of communication skills and trust. And professional military education isn't designed to teach these skills that members can leverage in a time of crisis. And so the impact from that is members suffer in silence. There's a lot of relationship issues. Some airmen from the study even said that they've already made up their mind that they're departing from service because of this. And then ultimately, some of them actually revert to suicide. And so my team, Master Sergeant Andrew Caprio, retired Senior Master Sergeant Dr. Eric Cast, teamed up with Bubo Learning Design, Mark Evans, he's the CEO and founder, with 20 years of experience, private industry leader, and he also has Air Force veterans on his team, created this course to basically enhance communication skills and human-centric skills that we really don't get in PME. And so what this course workshop actually goes over and what it teaches is everything in the bulleted list on your left: emotional intelligence, building trust, scenarios coaching, listening to learn instead of listening to respond, and having those crucial conversations. So this is the overview. So during Project Enigma, it's a 40-hour workshop, and we wear civilian clothes to ensure that there's no barriers to communication between the students. And the items that are needed for this course, like a TV or projector to show these slides I'm about to show you, flip chart or whiteboards, sticky notes, pen and paper. It's very simple. And there's also a facilitator's guide that will actually go over everything that you need for every module. But everything is very self-explanatory, and really the skills that are needed to run this course is just basically how to facilitate and how to ask open-ended questions to get group discussions going. So let's jump into day one. So we go over our learning mission for the day. We talk about what I kind of just talked about, is building mission-ready airmen and guardians, as well as families, to improve retention and prevent suicide by creating those relationships that members can leverage in that time of crisis. This is the week's mission. And then we get into our first activity. So as you'll notice, Project Enigma, this workshop is not a death by PowerPoint slide. It's all about shared experiences, learning new concepts, and then discussing them in the class. There's also a student handbook that students can, or a learner's guide, the students can actually do self-assessments and discuss as well. So it's going to take a lot of effort to basically just facilitate and ask these open-ended questions and do these exercises. So this is the first one, and then it gets into another one. So as you can see up top, it's kind of time gated. So you have like 15 minutes for some, there's 20 minutes for others. And then they get into another activity of their definition of a successful leader. And then another activity, the realities of leadership, what questions you wrestle with daily on trying to serve your subordinates, but also get the mission done, and reflecting on the kind of leader you want to be and what growth opportunities do you see for yourself. Then we continue with this activity. And then this is where we reference the learner's guide. Now, all material for Project Enigma is in the Teams page, as well as the Google Drive, which you all have access to at the end of this course. And then we get into workshop expectations to ask the airmen, like, what are they getting out of the workshop? What are they expecting to get out of it? And how are they going to bring it back to the Air Force, to the Space Force, to their families by investing in it? And now this workshop can include the main target audience as airmen, NCOs, but we also ran a course that had senior NCOs and officers in it, and every single person gained something from this course. So it's really open to anyone who wants to take it. But definitely the junior enlisted is the main target audience for this course. So every day they'll get an event card at the end of the day, and this is what it kind of looks like. So they're given a scenario, and it's actually labeled day one, and there's different events. So this is event number 3, and here's a problem that they have, and then they will use principles that they've learned throughout the day to solve this card. They'll also get an answer sheet, so they don't have to pretty much guess and say like, I'll solve it because this is what I think the right answer is. These answer sheets, they coincide. So you have event number 3 right here, and then you have the event number 3 right here. And it basically gives them 3 options, and basically using the course concepts, they can solve it using that way. So it's pretty easy. Make sure to ask those open-ended questions like, how would you use emotional intelligence to solve this issue? It's very straightforward. Now we get into more of the part of the discussion. So how many people say that they're inclined to re-enlist? You know, there's a lot of first-term airmen that are motivated to leave at their first opportunity. Why? Just more general questions. There's going to be a lot of discussions in this course, and it's going to be you know, difficult to kind of keep pressing forward because a lot of the students want to share a lot of their experiences, what they've seen throughout their military career. It's fantastic to get all this insight, and it builds trust along with the other students, but just be cognizant of the time so that way it doesn't run over for the day. And we get into sort of the discussion piece of it of, you know, personal needs versus practical needs. And then another group activity. So reference the learner's guide, page 4, page 5, and then they actually analyze their scenario, write down the needs of each character. They have 10 minutes to do this, and then 20 minutes for the whole activity. Then we get to more of the instruction part. Make sure this is a really great opportunity whenever we get to the instruction part, have the students read off the bulleted list or any of the slides as well to just get more involvement. Another small group activity that lasts 30 minutes, some of the challenges of providing personalized leadership support for airmen, guardians, and families. And this is where we'll utilize sticky notes. We get to the 8 leadership challenges for effective communication. And these are the 8 things that we actually discovered through our design warfare cohort that airmen said that the reason why they felt like they were getting out or they didn't want to stay in the Air Force or in their current jobs any longer is because of these 8 things. You know, you got right here, can't get fired. Performance issues are unaddressed. Personnel really are removed from positions where they're ineffective. Transitioning from peer to supervisor. It's hard to communicate when, you know, you might be friends with that person and now you're their supervisor. Diversity, airmen from all walks of life, you know, they might not think that they have things in common with one another and they don't know how to get that relationship started. So these are just the top 8 things that we're able to identify. There are videos embedded in this course. So we have the first one, which is the Kobayashi Maru, the Star Trek video. Basically, the captain of the ship wants to do the right thing and save some crew members in a restricted zone. They enter it, and you know, the captain ends up getting her entire crew killed because they didn't follow protocol. So these are the struggles of leadership that we deal with every single day, of trying to do the right thing, but yet we have a mission and we have rules that we have to adhere by. And then we talk more about that and get the students involved in how they've seen this in their daily Air Force lives. Now we get into more of the emotional intelligence piece, where we talk about the emotional contagion activity, and we get into flawed thinking types later, and these are the 4 that we'll talk about. So we talk about more about the emotional contagion, our feelings and how they affect others around us. For instance, if your boss was to come in and snap at you, how that would affect you, and how might that contagion, you know, go to one of your peers or subordinates because of how you were treated. And we talk a lot about that in this activity. Now, this is more of the instruction piece. So for these bulleted items, you can call on students and have them get involved, ask open-ended questions after they read one of these lines to see how they feel about it or what their perspective is. More emotional intelligence. So we talked about the emotional contagion. Now we talk about emotional intelligence and emotional labor. You know, work that employees have to do to control their feelings and expressions in their workplace and regulating those emotions. And we talk about organic and adopted behaviors. You know, we're not naturally inclined to be emotionally intelligent. It's actually a learned behavior, whereas some of our natural behaviors that are organic That's us as people, but we can learn to adopt these. We talk about our brain, how it works, how it controls our emotions, which is the amygdala. Threats of the past, approaching animals, sounds in the woods at night. But today in the workplace, a threat might be having other people take credit for our work or being blamed for someone else's mistakes. And this triggers an emotional response in our brain that's, fight, flight, or freeze. So we talk about the amygdala and how to hijack it to better cope and use emotional intelligence during interactions. Now we get into a small group activity about physical responses when we're emotionally stressed. Talk about the amygdala hijack. So the big idea, when we are in a state of physical agitation or distress, it's not easy to think or behave rationally. So some people who might not have experience in dealing with, these kind of situations might go and defend their idea or their stance to a point that it actually hurts their stance because of the way that they respond emotionally. And so we refer to that as the amygdala hijack. Get into another small group activity to talk about that. Like, how did you feel and how did those feelings affect the conversation when we talk about past amygdala hijack conversations that, airmen have? Then we get into the 3 R's of emotional intelligence: rational, reasonable, and responsible. Another activity about irrational thinking. And part 2 of the activity for 20 minutes, unrealistic thinking about yourself, others, and circumstances or the environment. And this will, you can either utilize a flip chart or whiteboard. And then we just do a review of what we've learned so far. Successful leaders, the personal and practical needs, the amygdala, basically the basics of emotional intelligence. And then we get into more in depth with it. So this is the 5 components that we'll learn, and it takes about 90 minutes about self-awareness, self-governance, social awareness, social agility, and empathy. This is where we can call on students and have them read these and ask those open-ended questions. And if you have any issues with trying to think of open-ended questions, there are a lot of let me share my screen again. There are a lot of in the notes section, suggestions in here. So if you look on the past slides, it'll actually show, have questions that you can leverage when you're instructing, so that way you're not having to think of it on the spot. So we get into social awareness, our blind spots for social awareness. Then we get into self-governance. You have mindless emotion that can be, a career ender. If you're unable to, if you're mindlessly controlling your emotions and having outbursts, or mindful emotion, which is where, you use your emotion to the best of its abilities to, communicate effectively. This is a good quote. If you can calmly tell people how you're feeling, you won't need to show them how you're feeling. And then there is a self-assessment, the learner's guide on page 6. You can take 2 minutes, read the instructions, and ask if there's any questions. And so, like I said, you'll be able to print all this material from the Teams page or from the Google Drive with the links that I'll provide at the end of this. So that way you can print this off, you can review all this material in advance. Another activity, it's a little short one, I think it's about 2 minutes. And then we get into self-governance, and again, have the students read off the bulleted items, controlling thoughts, broadening your focus, even practice deep breathing to kind of regulate how you're feeling, have some, assume good intent, aim for regulation, not repression. Social awareness and social agility. And then another activity, they count off in 1s and 2s. And then we get into empathy. So empathy is so important to emotional intelligence. Like here in the slide, engine for building trust and behavior, but it's also our brakes when we're behaving badly and become aware of any pain we might be causing. It is definitely a learned behavior, so that's why we talk a lot about empathy in here. And then we have our reviews. So the 5 components of emotional intelligence, and then some bulleted items, some instruction for students. And this is a great opportunity to ask for open feedback, ask those open-ended questions to get the discussion going. Most of the students that sign up for the courses, they want to be there. So they're very opinionated and they share their experiences. And it's really great to see, students share the experiences that they've had and then have other students, chime in and be like, yes, I've seen that as well. So it's definitely great. It's a tacit learning is what this course is all about. So we learn off these shared experiences and then talk about the instruction piece and how we can better utilize it. Now we get into flawed thinking. So I don't know if anyone's seen this movie where each character represents a different emotion, but we used it here in this course because it fits very well. So we have catastrophizing, seeing perceived setbacks as far larger and more harmful than what they actually are. Like for me, if I leave my cat card at home, I drive all the way to work, I get there, that's probably a time where I'll catastrophize and think get a little bit more upset than what I should. It's not it's not going to end my day or anything at work, but it is going to take time away to go back and get it. There's personalizing, overanalyzing, which I think that we all do at some level. And then there's memorializing. And then we get into an activity where we help each other identify techniques and best practices for minimizing or avoiding the flawed thinking styles that students self-identify with the most. And then they get into their event card for the day. So this is the time where, like I said, you'll have all the material, you have all the event cards and the answer sheets, as long as the learner's guide already pre-printed out. And you can hand out these cards for day 1. As well as the answer sheets, and then give students some time to think about it and solve. Go around the room and ask them what their answers were and why they chose that answer, and see if other students got the same answer. There is, I believe, 8 event cards for the day, so some students might have the same one. So it's a good time to say, hey, did anyone else have this same event card? And see if they got the same answer. And that's it for day 1. So like I said, it's a lot of group activity, a lot of discussion, a lot of time to get together and have some crucial conversations and shared experiences, and that's what it's about. Like I said before, this course is not death by PowerPoint, so it really relies on some facilitation on the instructor's end to be able to get those conversations going. And trust me, they will be going, and it's going to be hard to interrupt the discussion, say, all right, we have to move on to the next lesson. So that's the great thing about it, but just sometimes it might be pressed for time. So we get on to day 2 and we do a look back at day 1. You'll notice in the Teams page and in the Google Drive, there are posters that you can print off for each of the days that has the basically the main concepts of what they learned for like emotional intelligence. And you can actually get those posters made through your local FSS or, maybe from a private, business, and you can hang those up on the wall for students to reference. And I think it's really helpful when we do our reviews at the beginning of every day, where they look at the previous day's core concepts. And when we ask these questions or we go over these bulleted items, we can ask open-ended questions, and they can reference that poster that's hanging on the wall. So this number reflects the amount of Google searches for what is leadership. So we get into the first activity for day 2. This is part 2 of this activity. You can use a flip chart or you can use a whiteboard, either one. But we mainly connect leadership with having strong communication skills. And you'll notice that in this activity, most of the great concepts of great leaders, they're able to put an asterisk next to that skill that requires strong communication skills. We talk about organizational dysfunction, and this is a fun one because a lot of airmen, guardians, families, they love talking about how dysfunctional their organization or how dysfunctional their family might be. So the discussion is really going to be going pretty good in day 2, talking about this stuff. So just be cognizant on time. The Hearst principle. So we talk about, yes, every organization is dysfunctional, but it's just a matter of, what level of dysfunction that really is. And so we talk about that. And so here's some questions about the Hurst principle that we can ask the class. And it really ties into, do these students unintentionally contribute to this dysfunction? And how do they manage and minimize the dysfunction? It's a large group discussion, and part 1, it's about 5 minutes. And then they classify the dysfunction that they see as minor, moderate, or major. Part 3 of this, when they categorize the dysfunction in their organization or their family, they can actually answer these questions. And in what ways does this really impede our mission? How long does disruption really last? And that way you'll see some answers that had, major or moderate, they'll actually get downgraded possibly to minor, or maybe some of the minors will actually get upgraded to the moderate. So asking these questions is really good, so students can actually see if their organization is really as dysfunctional as they think, or their family, or maybe it's not, maybe it's worse than what they thought. Small group activity for 15 minutes. Talking more about dysfunction. And then review. Students can read these bulleted items. This is your time to think of an open-ended question or utilize the notes section of the PowerPoint that have some preloaded open-ended questions already added in there. Some main points we talk about. Now we get into trustworthiness. So this is probably one of my favorite concepts that's taught in the course, about how you are, as a leader and as a teammate, you want to aim to be trustworthy, and trust is the end goal of what you get out of it. It's the result of being trustworthy. And this video actually gets into it. It can explain it a lot better than I do. It's a TED Talk with Dr. O'Neill, and it's about 10 minutes long, and she goes into this in depth. It's fantastic. That's why we put it in the course, because she talks, analyzes it very well and breaks it down. And we talk about creating trust, honoring boundaries, ethical use of power, empowering others. And then here's a portion where we open up the learner's guide, and students can self-assess how trustworthy they are. And this conversation actually might run longer than 15 minutes, because we're asking students to consider and discuss the most damaged relationship they've had in the Air Force or Space Force. Don't identify anyone by name or anything like that. But you will hear some very awful stories about what some airmen, guardians, and families had to deal with in their career, and how they overcame it, or how maybe it wasn't resolved. So it says 15 minutes, but there's some very surprising stories you may hear during this part, which may allow you to stretch this out a little bit longer. So as students tell these stories, in the workshop together, they actually build a lot of trust with one another, because they're sharing stuff that's very personal. And it's great to see, people connect and be able to be vulnerable enough to share this stuff. So really like this activity. And then we do a review. We talk about connections, and we tie it back into emotional intelligence. You can manage and minimize dysfunction best within trusting relationships. And that's what we really want to get the main point across. Talk about behaviors and characteristics of influential leaders. And if you need to reference, ask any open-ended questions, again, in the notes section of this PowerPoint, it has all that preloaded in there to help you out. Creating organizational credibility, influence, in the different categories. And then a review. And then that's it for the day. They get their event card, they get their answer sheet, and then give them about 5 or 10 minutes, and then go around the room and see how students responded to to the problem that they were presented and how they answered it using the answer sheet, and see if any other students solved it the same way. And that's it for day 2. So we're on to day 3. Again, a review at the beginning of the day is great. If you have those posters printed out, even better, so that way they can reference that. 4 communication behaviors of emotionally intelligent leaders: showing up, stepping up, leaning inward, and leaning forward. These are the definitions of each of those. This is a great time to ask some open-ended questions on how they've seen this or how some students practice this. And that's the large group discussion that we get into. Now there is an individual activity right here. And we talk about organic and adaptive behaviors, kind of like emotional intelligence, where some of the things, is learned behavior and adopted, and some of it is natural. That comes naturally to that person. So the same concept applies here. Another self-assessment on their learner's guide on page 8 about their communication style. And then a review. A lot of open-ended questions. This portion will run pretty long. And then we get into preparing and delivering a message, using showing up, stepping up, leaning inward, and leaning forward. Being clear, concise, courageous, consistent, and in context, describe the message and deliver. This is the first part of the preparing and delivering a message. This is the second part. They open their learner's guide to page 13. And they will have an evaluation sheet where they will, prepare a message and deliver it, and students are encouraged to give constructive feedback to that. This is part 3. So basically you'll have a coach or an observer. You have someone who delivers the message, and then someone who's being the airman or the subordinate or the peer that the message is being received by. And they will practice it a few times. And the evaluation sheet's on page 15 of the learner's guide. So students get some practice with actually doing this stuff. So it's very helpful, because I know, coming up in the Air Force, I didn't have this practice of delivering messages. So it's kind of like, hey, this is what it is. So it's great that especially young junior enlisted get the opportunity to do this. And then you have a debrief. What did you learn about your communication style in this situation? Why was it difficult? What have you learned so far this week that will help you be an adaptive communicator? Listening to understand instead of listening to respond. Love this portion. We break out into an individual activity for 10 minutes using sticky notes. Now, this is a fantastic video. It's another TED Talk on how to have a better conversation. It's one of the lost arts of us as leaders, and especially when the younger airmen. A lot of our communicating is done over phone, through text, virtually. And so this is a fantastic video where Celeste Headley, she's able to give 10 great tips on how to be a better communicator, and it's very, very helpful. Enjoyed this video. So seeking to understand before judgment is what we talk about next. And then we break out and do a small group activity for 30 minutes. So they'll take turns sharing a difficult situation that you now face, and you seek to understand, and the partner who's listening will try to pretty much ask open-ended questions in trying to help that person understand their difficult situation better. It's very effective, because a lot of us, unless you go to facilitator training, you might not really know how to ask open-ended questions. It's pretty much, hey, how you doing today? Good. So this is a great opportunity for people to practice asking open-ended questions and really helping someone who's going through a difficult situation. We'll do a review. And they get the event card for day 3. So we go over showing up, stepping up, leaning in, leading forward. And then they get their event card, their answer sheet, they solve it, and that's it for the day. And then we get into day 4. Again, at the beginning of day 4, we're going to take a look back and a review of day 3. We get into crucial conversations. This is a 30-minute activity and discussion. These are the steps for having crucial conversations that we break down one by one. So the first step, know yourself, know your own biases and assumptions, your own flawed thinking. Step 2, make the conditions safe. Make the content safe. Control your emotions. Share your stories. Move from conversations to results. And then a review. This part will actually take a little bit of time. So it's pretty good to not rush it. We have plenty of time in this day to kind of go over it because we're having crucial conversations throughout the day. So that's totally fine if it runs longer. Then you go to the actual practice of it. So using the 6 steps, they'll pair up with a partner and they will look over 2 crucial conversations that were given. They'll work in pairs, prepare and deliver a message using 6 steps. So we're kind of, at this point in the course, we're using emotional intelligence, we're using, the adaptive communication, and we're having, crucial conversations using the skills that they also just learned, kind of trying to tie it all in together. And then we have a debrief. So after, a 60-minute practice and going over and practicing having crucial conversations, they'll have a debrief, what led the crucial conversations, what felt effective, because this is their opportunity to try different things with their partners to see what works and what style is best for them. What did you learn from the previous days that helped you, such as emotional intelligence, building trust. Then we get into coaching and feedback. I feel like this is something that should be shared a lot earlier in our careers. Coaching and giving actual feedback that's effective. We talk about the purpose and why it's important to do that. Meaning, the safety and the success of doing it. You have a 15-minute coaching and feedback activity. This is more of the instructional piece. So again, you can have the students read these portions, ask them what this means to them. How does this make them feel? Get a lot of good conversations going. And this is the 4 components of effective communication. This is actually a shorter video. I think it's about 4.5 minutes long, but it's really, really great. And the concepts are right here from the video. So start with the micro yes question, a data point, an impact statement, and then you end it with another question. Talk about blur words. So blur words are also talked in the video, words that confuse the feedback that's being given to someone. And so we just write down as many as we can and try and practice not using blur words by identifying what blur words actually are. The learner's guide on page 16. This is a creative and courageous or careless activity. You can do effective feedback. Again, you can have the students read this off, get more interaction. We talk about the coaching for capability to build when an airman or guardian's doing great things, or corrective action when something negative happens, you need to correct that. Talk about capability coaching and corrective coaching a little bit more. And then coaching and feedback skills. So for this one, kind of like what we did earlier, where you have, a pair will go up in front of the class, they will prepare to deliver a message or some feedback using either corrective or capability coaching, and they'll do it in front of the class. We put this in here, no Academy Awards being given out. So when they go and they run through their scenario in front of the class, we do have some of the students who try and get a little animated with it. So that's totally cool, but just trying to keep it in context. And then we have a debrief. How did the practice help them? What new behaviors will they adopt? And any questions they have regarding this. They get their event card for the day. So they'll get their answer sheet as well. They'll solve it, they'll share with the class, and that's it for day 4. Now day 5, the last day. Again, a review, days 1 through 4. So for today, day 5 is all about review. It's all about practicing. This is their opportunity to practice the skills. If they were unclear about something or they felt that they needed to elaborate or practice something more, this is their opportunity to do that. So as we go through day 5, it's basically open-ended questions, getting the class talking, and really reviewing days 1 through 4, as well as graduation at the end of this. So as you see, a lot of the slides goes from day 1 all the way through day 4 with open-ended questions. I think this is really helpful, even though it is a review of day 1 through 4. It's extremely helpful to have this because because you have to keep the course moving. It allows those students to really talk about more topics that that they didn't get to really elaborate on in case we're running low on time. So I think this is very helpful. And a review for day 5. And then really we hit on this last point before concluding. Day 5 can honestly, depending on how long you're pressed for time, it could be a half a day, then you have graduation, or it could last a full day in case students really want to dive into the course material again. But the day 5 debrief, we talk about why these skills are important with suicide prevention. It's all too common in the military. As a leader and family member, how do you plan on connecting with others to offer support? Even in our darkest times, me personally, it was my family and friends and coworkers, like peers and supervisors that I trusted to help me get me out of that dark place. And so we talk about this as pretty much the capstone on why these skills are so important of building trust and effective communicating, because it's each other. We are the strongest link in that defense to stop airman suicide and also help retention when it comes in the Air Force. And so we talk about that in this last portion, and like what resources are available besides us being good wingmen, being good guardians and family members to each other. What can we do, and what resources are available to help people. So this is a time to talk about Military One Source, mental health, and all other resources that are available to military members. We have a course conclusion. We thank them. We talk about how you are the strongest deterrent in the fight against suicide, retain our best airmen, guardians, and families. And then this is the portion. So before we hand out the graduation certificates, which are also in the Teams page or Google Drive, they will take the survey. They can scan this with their phones. I briefed this course to Chief Bass, and she asked that every course that we do, we continue to collect feedback. We want to know how effective the course is. We've gotten a lot of rave reviews from all the students that have went through the course. They said it's extremely helpful. They learned so much that they didn't learn in ALS or NCOA. And so we want to continue to capture that data so that way we can lift this information up to the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Chief Master Sergeant of the Space Force, and maybe change how professional military education is for the Department of the Air Force. So please have all the students scan this link. It goes to a Google Forms in the Google Drive, and we can send that out after every class as well, all the results. So please have them do this. And then this is your opportunity to thank them for their time. They have the certificates, and thank them for attending the course. And so that is basically the course and how to facilitate it. It's extremely simple to run through. It just takes really some facilitation. But like I said, in the notes section of the PowerPoint, it has preloaded open-ended questions and helpful tips to run through this. So you'll see the event cards. I'll put some links in this YouTube video. It'll have pretty much to the links to the Google Drive, which will have the event cards, the learner's guides, and the facilitator's guide. That'll pretty much be available to y'all. So I would highly suggest trying to do a dry run of this course with you and a partner. Make sure it all flows well, that you're comfortable and understand the material, and then you are free to facilitate as necessary and as you wish. So I just want to thank you for signing up to be a facilitator, because at the end of the day, like that last slide said, we're the strongest barrier to stopping suicide from happening in the Air Force, Space Force, and with our families. So it's on us to take care of one another, but we need to build that trust and be effective communicators. It's going to help in our careers, but also it's going to help save lives. And so we just thank you for your time and for signing up to do this. If anyone has any questions, they can reach out to me, Master Sergeant Brett Kiser. I'm in the Global at Yokota Air Base. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you. Have a good day.